Did you know that today humanity is facing a massive extinction? Approximately 7,000 languages are currently spoken around the globe, and over 50% of them are at risk of disappearing. That means that by the end of this century, half of them will have died.
How is this possible? When native speakers died out or shift to speaking another language, the former one becomes a dead language, and when the last speaker disappears, it becomes extinct. This process is being accelerated by the dominance of economically powerful languages.
According to UNESCO, regions with the greatest linguistic diversity are also the ones with the most endangered languages, frequently belonging to indigenous populations. This can be caused by natural disasters, wars, repression, and cultural hegemony, among others.
UNESCO operates with a 5-level classification of endangerment: safe, vulnerable, definitely endangered, severely endangered, and critically endangered. Under the last classification, we can find the Hawaiian language.
Hawaiian, or Lelo Hawaii, is a Polynesian language spoken in the state of Hawaii in the United States of America. It was originated with the early Polynesians who settled the islands in the 4th century AD. Before developing an alphabet, the Hawaiians had only petroglyph symbols.
This alphabet was adapted from English in the early 19th century by American missionaries. They wanted to print a Bible in the Hawaiian language to educate the natives. They were unable to distinguish between many of the sounds in it, so they only used 8 consonants and 5 vowels.
The Hawaiian alphabet ended up consisting only of 13 letters. This is how the Hawaiian language sounds.
Hana kuokua ia naka palua a ua kaule ki ka hano a me na polo ki vila ma luna o kakao pakahi. Ua ku umai ka no pono a me kai ke pono ma luna o kakao no laila e aloha kakao ki kahi e ki kahi.
When the islands were annexed by the United States of America in 1899, the government prohibited by law the teaching and speaking of the native language in any public or private school in Hawaii, making English the official language in almost every aspect of public life.
This law established English as a medium of instruction for the government-recognized schools, but it did not ban the Hawaiian language in other contexts. The law specifically provided for teaching languages in addition to English, rendered Hawaiian the status of a foreign language.
In that time, children were forced to speak English and leave aside their mother tongue, being physically punished at school and even expelled if they were caught speaking Hawaiian. This dramatic change in the educational system caused great damage to the language. By that period, there were 2,000 people who spoke Hawaiian.
Despite the efforts of the new government, the Hawaiian language wouldn't die. In the 1970s, a renaissance of the Hawaiian culture emerged, and a renewed respect and concern for the native language was born. In 1978, Hawaiian once again was made an official language of Hawaii along with English.
In 1990, the U.S. government established a policy that recognized the right of Hawaii to preserve, use, and support its indigenous language. Schools were again allowed to teach the language, and several programs aimed to encourage its use were created. Students were taught Hawaiian history, language, and culture.
The year 1996 was proclaimed the Year of the Hawaiian Language. Many special languages-related events were held throughout the island, intended to raise awareness in the general public about Hawaiian and encourage people to study, use, and respect the language.
According to the University of California, today there are about 1,000 native Hawaiian speakers and around 8,000 who can speak and understand the language fluently. Professionals consider that Hawaiian as an indigenous language must remain detached from the English non-indigenous society in order to survive.
Nowadays, tourism, globalization, and the dominance of American English gave Hawaiian the status of a critically endangered language. In spite of all these factors, Hawaiian people are making great efforts to preserve the language and culture through different programs.
It is an interesting thought to consider that other than in Hawaii, there is no other place where Hawaiian is spoken. If Hawaiian language were to become extinct in Hawaii, there would be no place to relearn it. However, most linguists believe that it will not become extinct to several more generations.
Is it possible to prevent the extinction of this and so many other languages? Nowadays, people are becoming aware of the fact that with every language that disappears, we are losing an enormous cultural heritage, a piece of human history, and centuries of life.
So, what can be done to stop this massive extinction? Fortunately, there are many organizations that are creating programs to help preserving languages. We have tools and technology at our fingerprints that can help change this situation.
One example of this is the Endangered Languages project, sponsored by Google, in which users can not only access to up-to-date info, but can also play an active role in putting their languages online by submitting info or samples.
It is a fact that lots of languages are disappearing, and many more will eventually die, but we believe in the importance of their preservation, because with every language that we protect, there is a culture that we save.